On the lonely trail of Dust Valley, a little girl was left behind by the very woman who should have cared for her. Just when hope seemed lost, a rugged cowboy named Jace Callahan, riding his black stallion Onyx, appeared on the horizon. What followed was a fight not just for survival, but for love, family, and a place to truly belong. Would you have trusted a stranger in that moment? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Wishing you a beautiful day ahead. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story that might change the way you see the world. The sky above Dust Valley stretched wide and merciless, a pale blue canvas smudged with streaks of gray cloud that promised an early winter storm. The land below was harsh and dry, the sagebrush brittle, the earth cracked into lines like an old map. A wagon creaked along the trail, its wheels moaning under the strain, each turn kicking up a puff of dust that hung in the air like smoke. The desert wind carried grit sharp as needles, biting at the skin and tugging at the ragged canvas cover of the wagon. Inside, 9-year-old Clara Mayfield sat, huddled against the side, her arms wrapped around a faded rag doll she called Sarah. Clara was small for her age, with hair the color of pale wheat tangled from days of neglect, her cheeks chapped red from the wind. The doll in her arms, with one button eye missing and a crooked smile stitched long ago, was the last remnant of her real mother, who had died when Clara was still little. To Clara, Sarah was not cloth and stuffing, but a voice she could lean on in silence. The wagon jerked to a sudden stop. Clara looked up as her stepmother, Martha Mayfield, climbed down. Martha was a woman hardened by circumstance, but cruelty had carved itself into her features. Her hair was tied into a tight bun, strands of black threaded with gray, her lips thin and perpetually pressed into a frown. Since Clara's father had died in a mining accident the previous spring, Martha had grown colder by the day, her gaze sharp and calculating. "Out," Martha said flatly without even looking into the wagon. Clara blinked. "Out? This is where you get off," Martha continued, adjusting her shawl against the wind. "Town's a day's walk if you keep east. Someone will find you. Better chance than I've got feet in another mouth." Her words were like stones, cold and unyielding. Clara's small hands tightened around her doll. "But, no buts, girl. You ain't my blood. I've got debts enough without dragging you along." Martha's voice had no tremor, no hesitation, just practicality sharpened into cruelty. She reached for the reins again, climbed back onto the seat, and flicked the whip. The wagon rolled forward, the squeak of wheels fading into the distance, leaving behind only a swirling cloud of dust. Clara stood on the trail, frozen, the wind tugging at her hair. She hugged Sarah to her chest, whispering, "What do we do now?" Her feet were bare, already sore from the rocky soil, her stomach hollow. The vastness of the valley pressed in, endless in every direction. Wolves, she remembered, roamed at night. She had no food, no blanket, no shoes. Fear threatened to pull her down, but stubbornness, something inherited from her father, kept her chin tilted high. She would not crumple, not yet. From the ridge above, a rider paused, his stallion silhouette stark against the fading light. Jace Callahan lowered his spyglass. He had been following a band of wild Mustangs along the valley's edge, mapping their movements for a spring roundup, when the sight of the wagon halting caught his attention. He had watched as the woman ordered the child down and drove off, leaving her standing in the dust. The image made his jaw tighten until his teeth ground together. At 32, Jace was a man both formidable and weathered, tall and broad-shouldered from years of labor on the open range. His chestnut brown hair, streaked lighter by the sun, curled beneath the brim of a black Stetson worn smooth by time. His eyes, hazel, flecked with gold, were steady, but carried shadows that spoke of old wounds. His beard was trimmed, his face marked by faint scars from barroom fights and cattle drives gone wrong. Jace's life had been marked not only by hard work, but also by loss. Once he had loved a woman named Eliza Whitmore, gentle and full of laughter, but she had been taken from him by illness just months before their wedding. Since then, he had lived alone at his ranch along Bitter Creek, filling the silence with work and long rides into the valley. To most in town, Jace Callahan was respected, admired even, but distant, like a canyon carved too deep to bridge. Beside him shifted Onyx, his black Mustang stallion, 9 years old and built like a creature out of legend. Onyx's coat gleamed like polished obsidian, his mane flowing like silk in the breeze. His amber-brown eyes were sharp, intelligent, and loyal. Jace had broken him years ago, not with cruelty, but with patience and trust, and the bond between them had since grown unshakable. Now, as Jace studied the small figure left behind on the trail, something stirred in him. There was a stubborn courage in the way the girl stood, chin raised, doll clutched like a shield. It reminded him of Eliza, of the quiet strength she had carried even when sickness stole her breath. For the first time in years, Jace felt the hard walls of his heart shift. With a nudge of his boots, he urged Onyx down the slope. The stallion moved sure-footed, dust rising in his wake. Clara heard them before she saw them, the heavy rhythmic thud of hooves, a sound that filled her chest with both fear and awe. She turned sharply, eyes wide, clutching Sarah tighter. The rider approached, slowing his stallion to a walk. He removed his hat, revealing his steady gaze, and spoke in a voice calm as running water. "Afternoon, miss. You seem a long way from anywhere." Clara straightened, summoning courage that trembled inside her. "I'm going to Oregon," she said, though she had no idea which way that was. One corner of Jace's mouth twitched in a faint smile. "Oregon's a far piece from here." His eyes took in her frayed dress, bare feet, and the hollow hunger written across her face. "Mind if I ask where your folks are?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Don't have any. Mama died. Papa died. My stepmother left me." Her words were flat, as though they were facts memorized long ago. Jace felt anger rise hot in his chest, but he kept his voice even. He swung down from Onyx, boots landing in the dust, and knelt so he wouldn't tower over her. "What's your name, little lady?" "Clara Mayfield," she said, hugging her doll closer. Then, with quiet defiance, she added, "And this is Sarah." Jace nodded solemnly at the doll. "Pleased to meet you both. I'm Jace Callahan." He glanced at the setting sun, then back at her. "I've got a ranch not far from here. My cook makes the best stew in Nevada territory. You look like you could use a meal." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. Martha had always warned her. Strangers meant danger. She narrowed her eyes, searching his face. "You're not going to sell me, are you?" The question cut him, but Jace managed a soft chuckle. "No, miss. I don't deal in selling little girls. Against my code." Onyx lowered his great head, snorting softly. His warm breath stirred the strands of Clara's tangled hair. Tentatively, she reached out a small hand, brushing against his smooth black coat. The stallion stood perfectly still, as though understanding the fragility of the touch. Clara's tense shoulders loosened just a little. "You can trust him," Jace said quietly. "Onyx doesn't take to just anyone." Clara looked up at him, uncertainty still flickering in her eyes. Hunger twisted her stomach again, and she clutched Sarah closer. "I don't have money to pay for supper." "That's lucky," Jace replied, his smile gentle now. "Because I don't charge little girls for supper, against my policy." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Jace extended his hand. Clara looked at it for a long moment, then placed her tiny fingers in his. His calloused hand engulfed hers, and he felt the weight of something thaw deep inside his chest, something he thought had been buried forever. As the last light of day spilled across the desert, painting Dust Valley in hues of fire and ash, Clara Mayfield took her first step into a new life, hand in hand with the cowboy who would change everything. The first morning at Bitter Creek dawned cold and bright, with the air carrying the sharp scent of sagebrush and wood smoke drifting from the chimneys. Jace Callahan rode through the ranch yard, with Clara perched in front of him on Onyx's broad saddle, her small hands gripping the leather horn, her eyes widening as the buildings and corrals appeared. She had never seen a place so large. Barns, fences, cattle scattered like dark shadows across the pasture, and a house of timber and stone that rose tall against the sky. Clara whispered as if afraid the vision might vanish. "This is real, isn't it?" Jace's steady reply rumbled behind her ear. "It's as real as they come." Waiting on the porch was Rosa Alvarez, the woman who had kept Jace's household together for nearly a decade. Rosa was in her early 50s, short and solid, her dark hair streaked with gray and braided beneath a kerchief. Her warm brown eyes softened when she saw the pale girl clinging to Jace's side. "Madre de Dios," she murmured. "Jace Callahan, what have you brought home?" There was no judgment, only curiosity and concern. Clara drew back, hugging her doll Sarah, but Rosa crouched low, her voice gentle. "Hola, niña, you are safe here." Clara hesitated, then gave a small nod, and Rosa led them inside. The kitchen smelled of bread and stew, and hunger drove Clara to the table, though she still ate cautiously, hiding a crust of bread in her lap, as if afraid it might be taken away. Rosa noticed but said nothing, only refilled her bowl. When no reprimand came, Clara slowly relaxed, finishing the meal with silent determination, while Sarah sat propped on the bench beside her. Jace leaned against the fireplace, arms crossed, watching with quiet satisfaction as warmth filled a house long too empty. Days at Bitter Creek followed a rhythm new to Clara. Each morning, she woke beneath a quilt in her own room, the sound of Rosa's humming in the kitchen below. She followed Jace into the barn, where Onyx greeted her with a soft nicker. At first, Clara shrank from the stallion's towering frame, but Onyx lowered his head and breathed gently against her hair. She reached out timidly, her hand brushing the glossy black coat, and the horse stood still. Clara laughed, quick, startled, but real, and Jace felt something thaw inside him at the sound. Onyx, Rosa, and Jace had all earned her first fragile trust. Yet beyond the fences, whispers grew. In town, weeks later, when Jace drove the wagon for supplies with Clara beside him, voices followed them. Some said he had rescued her from bandits, others that a single man should not be raising a child alone. At the mercantile, Clara lingered outside while Rosa bartered for flour. A freckle-faced boy about her age approached. Tommy Cooper, the blacksmith's son, barefoot in patched overalls, tilted his head. "Pa says you don't really belong here. Is that true?" The words stung sharper than he meant them to. Clara hugged Sarah to her chest. "I do belong. Jace is my papa now." Tommy shrugged, unconvinced, and ran off, leaving her throat tight and her eyes hot. That night, Clara lay awake, the boy's words circling in her mind. At breakfast, Jace noticed her silence. He crouched beside her chair, his large hand covering hers. "What's troubling you, little lady?" Clara bit her lip, then whispered, "People think you'll send me away." Jace's eyes softened, shadows of old pain flickering there. "I lost someone once, Clara, and I swore never again. You're here. You're staying. No one will take you from Bitter Creek while I've got breath in me. That's my word." His promise calmed the storm inside her. Rosa deepened that comfort later as they worked in the kitchen together. She told Clara of her childhood in Mexico, how she had once feared being left behind herself, and how kindness had saved her. "Mija," she said, brushing flour from Clara's cheek, "you and I understand each other. That is why we hold tight when love comes." For the first time, Clara leaned against her willingly, finding warmth not only in Jace's vow, but in Rosa's steady presence. The true test came on a Sunday at the small clapboard church in Bitter Creek. When Jace walked in with Clara between him and Rosa, the congregation turned, whispers rippling. The minister, Reverend Samuel Pratt, silver-haired and solemn, welcomed them kindly, but suspicion lingered in the pews. Clara sat stiff, hands clenched in her lap. When the hymn began, she hesitated, then softly sang the verse Rosa had taught her at home. Her child's voice, thin but steady, carried through the murmur of the congregation. A few heads turned, not with judgment this time, but surprise. Old Mr. Daniels, the storekeeper, dipped his head. Mrs. Harper, the seamstress, smiled faintly. Though the doubts did not vanish, a seed of acceptance was sown. That evening the sky burned red over Bitter Creek, cattle moving like shadows across the pasture. Clara stood on the porch with Sarah tucked beneath her arm, watching Jace mend a gate while Onyx grazed nearby. She whispered to her doll, "This is home now." And though the town's whispers lingered, inside her heart a fragile certainty grew stronger. Bitter Creek was hers, and she belonged. By the time spring settled over Bitter Creek, the snows had melted into rushing streams, and the sagebrush shone green beneath a restless wind. The ranch hummed with new life, calves bawling in the pastures, dogs chasing the dust at riders' heels, lanterns flickering in the barns before dawn. For Clara, who only weeks before had stood abandoned on a trail with nothing but a rag doll in her arms. Each morning was a marvel, each task a discovery, and for the first time in her life, she woke not with dread, but with anticipation. Her days began at the oak table, where Jace sat with a slate and chalk, the lantern still burning low against the dim morning light. He was patient, though his big hands were better suited for rope and reins than letters. "See here," he would say, tracing out an A with surprising care. "You follow the line steady, no rushing." Clara tried to copy, her tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth, but the chalk broke often and crooked lines filled the slate. At first frustration brought tears to her eyes, and she muttered that Martha had always said she was too slow to learn. Jace leaned close, his hazel eyes steady. "Martha didn't know what she was talking about. You're not slow, you're just starting. Even the best rider falls a dozen times before he sits a horse proper." The words sank in, and Clara tried again. After many mornings of stubborn practice, one day her name appeared, Clara Mayfield, clumsy but clear, and the pride that swelled in her chest made the broken chalk worth it. When lessons ended, Rosa took her into the kitchen or out to the garden. At first Clara hung back, wary that chores meant endless scolding, but Rosa's firm hands guided her gently. She showed her how to press dough until it sprang back, how to stitch torn cloth into straighter lines, how to bury seeds with care. As they worked, Rosa told stories of her childhood in Mexico, her grandmother's sayings, her laughter brightening the room. Clara listened warily at first, but Rosa never snapped, never struck her hands when stitches slipped, and slowly Clara began to smile, flour dusting her nose, giggling when Rosa sang in Spanish. It was in those small moments, kneading dough or threading a needle, that Clara felt the stirrings of safety, of belonging to someone who cared if she failed or succeeded. The ranch hands grew fond of her in their own ways. Old Pete, gray-bearded and stooped, seemed gruff at first, his voice a growl as he muttered about chores. But one evening, he pressed a small wooden horse, carved from pine, into her hand. "Don't say I never gave you anything," he grumbled, though the softness in his eyes betrayed him. Clara carried it everywhere, tucked into her apron pocket. Billy Turner, the lanky 17-year-old, laughed easily and showed her how to whistle sharp. The first time she blew, the ranch dogs came barreling toward her, knocking her into the dirt. And instead of anger, Billy only laughed, until he cried, helping her up and dusting her dress. Tex Harlan, the foreman, tall and stern beneath his wide hat, carried an air of command. Yet each morning he tipped his hat to Clara with deliberate respect, calling her Miss Mayfield, and insisted she greet the hands with the same courtesy. "Teaches you pride and manners both," he told her, and Clara obeyed, secretly pleased to be treated as if she mattered. And then there was Onyx, the great black Mustang. At first Clara feared him, his size overwhelming, his muscles shifting under sleek midnight fur. Jace knelt beside her, guiding her small hand forward. "Let him smell you first. Horses know who means harm and who doesn't." Clara's fingers trembled as Onyx's warm breath touched her skin. Then the stallion lowered his head, brushing against her shoulder. A laugh burst from Clara, bright and surprised, and Onyx flicked his ears as if satisfied. Soon Jace began teaching her to ride within the corral, lifting her onto the saddle while he led Onyx in slow circles. She gripped the horn white-knuckled at first, but gradually loosened, feeling the rhythm of movement beneath her. Each lap brought more confidence, and with Jace's steady voice nearby, Clara sat taller, hair flying in the wind, until laughter replaced fear. Evenings were her favorite. Lanterns glowed in the windows, Rose's cooking filled the house with warmth, and the fire crackled while Jace read aloud from the worn Bible in his deep, measured tone. Clara sat curled with Sarah in her lap, stitching crooked seams with Rose's help, the wooden horse safe in her pocket. For the first time, she understood what it meant to share a hearth, to belong to a circle of voices and laughter that asked nothing of her but to simply be. One night, however, she nearly shattered her fragile peace. Sent to fetch Rose's lantern from the porch, Clara grew distracted chasing the dogs and stumbled, the lantern swinging wildly. Rosa gasped as the flame flared, fear flashing across her face. But before a word of anger could rise, she caught Clara in her arms, snuffing the lantern quickly. "Mija," she said firmly, her voice shaking, "you must be careful. Fire does not forgive." Clara braced herself for the slap Martha would have delivered, but none came. Instead, Rosa smoothed her hair and added gently, "Mistakes are lessons, not punishments. You are safe." Clara buried her face in Rosa's shoulder, relief and gratitude mingling, the memory of harshness replaced with something new, grace. From then on, she trusted Rosa without hesitation. In the barn, she trusted Jace's steady hands, and in the yard, she trusted Onyx's patient strength. Slowly, the word family no longer felt like something lost, but something she was living. She sang with Rosa in the kitchen, asked Jace endless questions during lessons, and ran barefoot across the yard, with Billy cheering her on. When old Pete handed her a sharpened stick to plant beans, and Tex corrected her posture with a nod of approval, she felt respected, seen. That night, Clara stood in her room at the window, Sarah and the little wooden horse clasped together in her hands. Outside, the barn lanterns flickered. Onyx shifted in his stall, and below she could hear Rosa humming as she finished dishes while Jace's boots creaked on the porch. Clara placed Sarah and the wooden horse carefully on the sill, facing outward. "So you can watch over our home," she whispered. Then she slipped beneath the quilt, the sense of belonging warming her more than the fire ever could. By midsummer, the hills around Bitter Creek were baked gold beneath the Nevada sun, the air heavy with dust, and the creek itself running low, its waters trickling like a tired song. The ranch, however, thrived in its rhythm, cattle lowing in the fields, dogs darting between corrals, Rosa's voice carrying from the kitchen as she hummed old tunes, and Jace's steady footsteps echoing in the barn. For Clara, each day had become a lesson in belonging, the fear of being unwanted slowly softening into laughter and learning. Yet, shadows travel faster than sunlight, and the past has a way of finding a child who once lived on the edge of abandonment. It was on a blistering afternoon that a lone rider appeared on the ridge beyond the pasture. Clara spotted him first, a dark figure against the shimmer of heat, and a chill slid down her spine, though the air was hot enough to sting her cheeks. The man rode with stiff posture, his black coat incongruous with the season, and when he dismounted, dust billowed around polished boots that belonged more in a courtroom than a ranch yard. He was Silas Hartwell, an officer of the Territorial Children's Aid Society, a man of middle years, lean, sharp-featured, with gray threaded into his slicked hair and eyes like chips of stone. His mouth bent only in one direction, downward, as if kindness had long ago been scrubbed from his face. Clara was carrying a bucket from the well when his gaze fell on her, cold and appraising, and she clutched Sarah tighter beneath her arm. Something in his measured steps reminded her too much of Martha's disdain, and she hurried toward the porch where Jace was already waiting, his broad frame set like a wall of oak. Rosa stepped out behind him, wiping flour from her hands, her eyes narrowing. Hartwell removed his bowler hat with mechanical precision. "Mr. Callahan," he said, his voice flat and precise, "I come under instruction of the society. Rumor has reached Carson City that you are harboring a child without sanction of law. That matter cannot stand." Jace's jaw worked, though his voice when it came was steady as stone. "She isn't a matter, Hartwell. She's a girl who was left to die by the road. You know the truth of what your so-called facilities are. I will not send her to a place where children are packed like cattle and worked to the bone." Hartwell's gaze did not flicker, though his nostrils flared. "The law does not concern itself with sentiment. You are a single man, unfit to raise a girl. The society has order, structure, the protection of legitimacy." Rosa stepped forward, her small frame bristling with force. "I have seen those places, senor. Call them schools if you like, but they are cages. This Niña has found family here. She will not be hauled away by men who see her as a number on a ledger." Hartwell replaced his hat, the corners of his mouth thinning. "This will not be settled on porches or in kitchens. The court will decide." He turned, mounted, and rode off, leaving behind only the stifling weight of fear. That night, Clara pushed food around her bowl without eating. In her room, she pressed Sarah so hard to her chest, her fingers ached, whispering to the doll, "They'll take me away." Jace came and sat beside her bed, the lamplight painting deep lines across his face. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a gold locket, Elizabeth's locket. The memory of his late wife still carried close to his heart. He opened it, showing Clara the tiny photograph within. "Once I lost someone I loved, Clara. I will not lose you. No judge, no law, no man in a black coat can take you. You are mine now, and I am yours." His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of that vow, and Clara believed him because it came not as comfort, but as truth. The days that followed were uneasy. Billy whistled tunes to cheer her. Pete carved her another wooden horse. Tex corrected her greetings with extra courtesy. But every time dust rose on the horizon, Clara's breath hitched. She began asking questions in a whisper. "What if the law is stronger than you? What if they make you let me go?" Jace would pause, his hazel eyes fierce, and answer, "The law is only as strong as the men behind it. I will stand in front of you. That is my promise." 2 weeks later, Hartwell returned, this time with Sheriff Walt Danner. The sheriff was 60, broad-bellied under his tan coat, his gray mustache drooping, his face lined with years of hard choices. He was not cruel, but duty weighed heavy on him, and Clara saw it in his troubled eyes as he dismounted. "Jace," the sheriff said slowly, "papers have been filed in Carson City. They claim guardianship belongs elsewhere." His gaze slid toward Clara, then back. "I don't much like the way this smells, but the law has its ink." Jace's voice cut like a whip. "Guardianship? From the woman who abandoned her? From the man she married after? Don't talk to me about ink when I've seen her scars." Hartwell lifted a folded paper, crisp and stamped. "It matters not how she came here. It matters only that she is not lawfully yours." Clara stood on the porch, her small fist tight at her sides. Her heart pounded as she heard words that sounded like chains. And in that moment, she did what fear had never let her do before. She stepped forward, placed her hand in Jace's, and said clear enough for every man present to hear, "This is my home. He is my papa. I'm not going anywhere." The yard fell silent. Even the cattle lowed softly as if listening. Sheriff Danner shifted uneasily, tugging at his collar, and muttered, "You've got courage, girl, and I can't fault a man for fighting to keep family." He looked at Jace, conflicted but not hostile. "This isn't over, but I'll give you time." Hartwell's face darkened, his lips pressed thin, but he turned away, mounting his horse with stiff disapproval. "The court will hear of this defiance." As they rode off, Rosa wrapped Clara close, her voice firm in her ear. "Do not fear, mija. That man knows rules, but he does not know love. Love is stronger than any paper." Jace's hand rested heavy on Clara's shoulder, his presence solid, his vow unbroken. That evening the sky blazed crimson, shadows long over the pastures, and Clara sat on the porch steps with Sarah and her wooden horse in her lap. Behind her Jace stood, Rosa beside him, their silhouettes strong against the last light of day. The fear had not vanished, but the certainty grew in her chest like fire. She was not an orphan. She was not a burden left on the trail. She was Clara of Bitter Creek, and no law could make her forget that she had found a family who would fight for her. The last days of summer brought a strange unease to Bitter Creek. For a week the skies had grown darker by the hour, clouds sagging low over the valley, lightning flickering faint along the ridges. The cattle stirred restlessly, the dogs barked at shadows, and even Onyx pawed the ground, as if he too felt the storm building. Yet Clara sensed that another kind of storm was gathering, one born not of wind and rain, but of law and paper, and it pressed upon her heart heavier than thunder. On a sultry afternoon, Rosa noticed dust rising far down the trail. She shaded her eyes and muttered a prayer. Clara stepped onto the porch beside Jace just as 3 riders came into view, their silhouettes sharp against the brooding sky. Silas Hartwell rode in front, his black suit and stiff posture defiant against the dust, his narrow face unreadable. Sheriff Walt Danner followed, older and slower in the saddle, his tan coat buttoned tight despite the heat, his gray mustache twitching with unease. The third man was new to Clara, Judge Horace Wheeler, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair swept neatly back, his lined face both stern and searching. He wore a long gray coat, and though his presence commanded authority, there was a weariness in his eyes that spoke of years spent weighing men's fates. The riders dismounted as the wind picked up, scattering grit across the yard. Jace stood steady as an oak, Clara pressed close to his side, and Rosa appeared in the doorway with her flour-dusted apron. Judge Wheeler removed his hat, rain scent heavy in the air, and his deep voice carried. "Mr. Callahan, I have come to see for myself. The society claims this girl's guardianship is unsettled, that her place lies elsewhere. I must determine the truth." Jace's arms folded across his chest, his eyes burning. "The truth is simple. Clara was abandoned. I found her alone, starving, frightened. If I hadn't taken her in, she'd be dead now, and I'll not let her be thrown into one of Hartwell's so-called facilities." Hartwell stepped forward, clutching papers against the gusting wind. "Intentions are irrelevant. Without lawful sanction, this man is in violation. The child belongs to the society until matters are adjudicated." His clipped words rang as cold as iron. Before Jace could speak again, Clara lifted her chin, her small hand finding his larger one. Her voice trembled, but did not falter. "I don't belong to papers. I belong here. This is my home." Rosa's arm tightened protectively around her shoulders, her own dark eyes fierce. "You hear the truth, Judge. This Niña is not an orphan here." A low roll of thunder answered, and then the sky cracked open. Rain fell in sudden torrents, soaking the men and drumming on the roofs. Lightning lit the valley in blinding streaks, and the cattle bawled, surging against the fences. Onyx reared with a shrill cry, his black body shuddering in fear. Clara wrenched free of Rosa's grasp and dashed forward, her dress plastered to her legs by the rain. Jace lunged after her, but stopped when he saw her stand before the stallion, her hands raised. "Easy, boy, I'm here." Onyx's hooves struck the mud, his nostrils flaring, but Clara's voice cut through the storm. Jace reached her side, his strong hand closing on the halter, steadying the horse even as Clara stroked the wet muzzle with small, fearless hands. For a breathless moment, man, child, and horse stood together against the fury of the sky, and Onyx lowered his head with a shudder, soothed by the trust that bound them. Judge Wheeler watched, rain coursing down his face, his expression unreadable. Sheriff Danner called orders to the ranch hands as they hurried to calm the cattle, but his eyes returned again and again to the girl standing with Jace. Hartwell sputtered, trying to protect his papers from the rain, his voice lost beneath the roar of thunder. At last the storm began to ease, thunder rolling off toward the mountains, rain softening into steady sheets. Clara's hair clung to her face, her eyes bright with defiance as she led Onyx toward the barn, with Jace's arm protectively around her. She turned, her voice carrying across the yard. "You said the law needs clarity. Now you've seen it. I belong here." Silence followed. Wheeler replaced his hat slowly, regarding the child and the man beside her. His voice when it came was measured but sure. "Mr. Hartwell, the law seeks justice, not cruelty. I will take this matter back to Carson City and place my recommendation. But from what I have seen with my own eyes, this girl has a family here. Papers cannot change that." Sheriff Danner let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging as if relieved. He looked at Wheeler, then at Jace. "I've known Callahan 20 years. He's stubborn as a mule, but he keeps his word. If he says this girl is his family, I'll stand by it." Hartwell's face tightened with rage, but the storm had stripped his voice of authority. He mounted without another word, fury stiffening his every movement. Wheeler and Danner followed, the sheriff offering Jace a brief nod as they rode back into the rain-drenched distance. In the yard, Clara stood trembling, water dripping from her chin, but Jace knelt and cupped her face in his calloused hands. "No storm, no man, no law will take you from here. You are home." Rosa joined them, her arms wrapping both child and man, and the three stood silent as the last roll of thunder faded across the valley. That night, the house glowed warm against the sodden darkness. Clara sat by the fire, Sarah and her wooden horse on her lap, Onyx's quiet breathing drifting from the barn. Rosa brushed her damp hair, humming softly, while Jace read aloud, his deep voice steady and full. Clara leaned against him, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her heart alight with certainty. The storm had come, but she had stood in it, and she knew beyond doubt that love was her shelter. The storm that had battered Bitter Creek passed into memory, leaving the valley washed clean, the air sharp with the scent of wet earth and sage. For days afterward, the sky stretched vast and blue, a calm dome above the pastures, as though the heavens had finally relented. Inside the ranch house there was a new kind of stillness, not the brittle quiet of waiting for trouble, but the soft calm that followed a test endured and passed. Clara felt it in every corner of the house, from Rosa's kitchen where bread baked golden in the oven, to the barn where Onyx stamped and snorted, his black coat glistening in the sun. For the first time since she could remember, she woke each morning without dread, but with the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. 2 days later, Sheriff Walt Danner returned, this time alone, his horse's hooves muffled in the damp earth. He carried no thunder at his back, only a leather pouch under his arm. On the porch he removed his wide hat, his mustache twitching as if reluctant to speak. Jace stood with folded arms, Clara peeking from behind him, Rosa drying her hands on her apron. Walt cleared his throat, eyes softening. Judge Wheeler made his recommendation. Carson City accepted it. Papers are signed. The girl stays here. No more questions. He handed Jace the sealed envelope, the wax glinting red in the sun. Clara watched Jace's big hands tremble just slightly as he took it, then crouched to look at her with eyes bright. "It's done, little one. No one can take you now." Clara flung her arms around his neck, and Rosa pressed a hand to her mouth, whispering a prayer of thanks. Life in the valley turned golden. The ranch hands, once quiet observers, made their loyalty known. Old Pete presented Clara with a small staff he had carved from juniper, her name etched along the side in crooked but proud letters. "For standing tall," he muttered, his eyes shining. Billy Turner played his fiddle one evening by the fire, declaring the tune Clara's Song, a sprightly reel that sent the dogs spinning in circles and brought laughter from everyone. Even stern Tex Harlan removed his hat, bowed slightly and said, "Miss Mayfield, you're part of the Double M crew now." Clara's cheeks flushed as warm as the hearth, her heart swelling with the knowledge that she was not only Jace and Rose's, but theirs as well. Her lessons with Jace grew easier. She no longer broke chalk in frustration, but filled her slate with neat rows of letters, her name steady and sure. Jace's rough hands, better suited for reins, tapped the table with approval as he smiled down at her work. "Told you so," he murmured, and she beamed. Afternoons belonged to Rosa, who taught her recipes and stitches, all the while humming lullabies that wrapped around Clara like soft blankets. Sometimes, when Rosa brushed her hair at night, she whispered, "Mi niña, family is not just blood. It is who you choose to hold close." Clara would close her eyes and feel warmth spread through her chest, deeper than any hearth fire. Onyx, too, became part of her world, in a way beyond fear. Jace often placed her on the saddle in front of him, his strong arm holding the reins steady while her small hands clung to the horn. They rode the valley in the amber glow of evening, Clara leaning against him, Sarah tucked in her lap. Once, as the sun dipped crimson, Clara asked in a hushed voice, "Papa, do you think your Elizabeth would like me?" Jace's throat tightened, and he drew her close. "She would love you, Clara. She always dreamed of a daughter to laugh and ride with. She'd be proud." Clara pressed the locket he had once shown her against her chest, comforted not only by the memory of Elizabeth, but by the certainty that love stretched from past to present, binding them all. The family celebrated one evening with quiet joy. Rosa baked sweet bread, dusted with sugar. Billy played his fiddle again, and Pete told a tall tale that had even Tex chuckling into his cup. Clara danced barefoot in the yard, Sarah clutched in one hand, her laughter rising into the night air. Jace stood watching, arms crossed, a rare smile softening his weathered face. Rosa slipped beside him, her arm through his, and whispered, "She is whole now." Jace nodded, his eyes never leaving the child spinning under the lantern light. Later, as the house settled into silence, Clara climbed the stairs to her room. On the sill, she placed Sarah the rag doll, Pete's wooden horse, and now the locket of Elizabeth, all three facing outward as if to watch over the valley. Past, present, and future sat side by side, the symbols of who she had been and who she had become. She whispered, "I'm somebody's forever," before curling beneath the quilt Rosa had stitched for her. On the porch below, Jace sat in his chair, the stars bright above the valley. Rosa joined him, their voices low as the night wrapped around them. In the corral, Onyx shifted, his silhouette strong against the moonlit grass, a living symbol of resilience and rebirth. Inside, Clara slept peacefully, no longer the abandoned child of the trail, but the daughter of a family forged not by circumstance, but by choice, love, and the strength to withstand every storm. And so, Bitter Creek rested, its lights glowing warm against the dark, the story of Clara ending not in loss, but in light. With Jace, Rosa, Clara, and the black Mustang Onyx standing together as proof that even the most broken past can be reborn into joy. At the end of this journey, we are reminded that family is not always written in blood or in law, but in the love that God places in our path. Just as Clara found a home in Jace, Rosa, and even in the strength of the black Mustang Onyx, we too can discover unexpected blessings when we choose to open our hearts. The storms of life may test us, but faith and love will always carry us through. Everyday life is filled with such moments: a kind word to a stranger, patience with a child, forgiveness given when it is hardest. These are the small miracles of God that bind us together. Clara's story teaches us that no one is too lost to be found, and no past too broken to be healed when we walk in His light. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment below, tell us how God has placed love in your life, and write Amen if you believe in the power of His miracles. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of hope and redemption. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may your home always be filled with the light of His love.